And we're live. Esports Asia TV, back with me, Andi, and welcome back, Sabir.
What's up, guys?
It's really nice to have you again.
Thanks.
And
man.
today we have our guest, Michael Patent. Is that how I pronounce that?
That's good enough.
All right. So, Michael, I'll just let you talk, man, because I think you love to talk, so that's really good for us. And so,
If you let me talk, nobody's gonna listen.
no. Let me make this clear. So, you are with Culture Group. You're the founder, am I correct?
I am.
All right. So,
Last I checked.
Culture Group is the one well, I wouldn't say responsible, but they are definitely involved in the Nike deal with Riot Games, League of Legends. And so, of course, we're going to talk about that. But let's just first talk about you, Michael.
Sure.
I want to know about you more. Like, let's just share, like, how did you, how were you brought up? Like, what did you get yourself into when getting into the professional life, and how did you end up here?
Absolutely.
Right
I'm gonna
Right.
I'm gonna filter some of this. Right? So
Sure.
there may be a hit on your web stream from,
Okay.
like from Palm Beach, Florida, where I think my mom is
Right.
down there.
That's awesome. Shout out
they're
to mom.
retired.
That's great.
Shout out to mom.
Thanks for boosting the demographics.
Yes,
Absolutely.
please.
You
All right.
You got to check that. I am from Scarsdale, New York, which is just outside of New York, and grew up in Westchester County and worked in sports and entertainment for the better part of the last 15 years. And I got into sports and entertainment as a kid going to Madison Square Garden with my father.
The Mecca.
So we would go, exactly, and we would go and watch Knicks games. And I remember being 7, 8, 9 years old, and we would go on Saturdays, and we would watch the Indiana Pacers versus the Knicks, which
Nice.
in my time was a big rivalry,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you the advertisers that I saw at that venue. I could tell you, it was Domino's Pizza that was being served.
Right.
It was Coca-Cola. It was Budweiser. It was Reese Restaurants. It was Bausch and Lomb. I think Panasonic.
Damn.
And I remembered that experience. Yes, there was a game going on, but there was this entire
But the surrounding, you're
Correct.
kind of taking everything in at the same time.
Correct. And
Wow.
then I went to university in upstate New York in this very cold city called Syracuse.
Syracuse.
Very famous for basketball.
Yeah.
And I went there primarily because my sister was a student there
Okay.
and fell in love with the campus, and I applied, and they let me in. And first mistake that they made. And then on campus, they have this very robust basketball culture. 30,000 people would show up to watch a game. And I really got excited
Into it.
again and
Right.
reinvigorated by what I was experiencing as a student, and made a decision to go into the sports and entertainment industry.
Right.
And worked in that capacity in New York and to a certain extent elsewhere in the U.S., a little bit in Los Angeles, for the better part of 8 or 9 years, and
Okay.
was working for a company based in L.A. called AEG, which is
AEG.
Anschutz Entertainment
Yep.
Group.
Right.
So they own and operate the Staples Center in Los
Yeah.
Angeles and Mercedes-Benz Arena in Shanghai. They've got this global sports and entertainment business.
Right.
And they gave me an opportunity to move to China, which is where I ended up in 2013,
Oh, I
and
see.
that led me on the journey to starting Culture Group, which we'll talk about shortly.
All right.
That's amazing. I think, something that you really highlighted there is the fact that it's just so overpowering, right? When you walk into an NBA, arena and you just see all the sponsors, all the food, all the ads, it's just, it's a beast. And I didn't realize it until I first went. Because, when you're watching it through the TV, it's different, right? You're watching placed ads they want you to see and stuff. But then when you're there, damn.
It is. And the thing that I love about, culture, right? And to us, culture is it's sport, it's music, it's esports and gaming, it's K-pop and K-drama, is each person who is a fan of culture in any capacity is going to remember their first cultural experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to say, you remember your first TV show or your first meal or your first movie. But if I ask you the first sporting event you went to,
Right.
Yeah.
or the first esports competition that you saw live,
definitely.
Absolutely.
or the
Definitely.
first esports athlete that you met in person that you touched,
Yes.
Damn.
you would remember that. And those memories are what form the foundation of all this passion that ultimately we're helping brands to connect with and helping consumers to engage in. And that's what you guys are doing a great job of ultimately discussing week after week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I gotta ask this question, this person.
Let's go.
So who's your favorite, athlete or star that you've met?
Yeah, I don't have a favorite.
You don't have a favorite?
No, I
Oh.
love them all. They're
Who
all
made the
great.
most-
But-
who made an impression? A good one.
To me, it's not necessarily about the talent or the athlete. It's it's about the people around them or the people who are representing them, and that's who I might engage with a little bit more But you can really tell people's true colors. And what I love about the work that we've been doing very specifically for the last 3 years in esports and gaming is there's an authenticity that is very difficult to find in other areas of culture.
Do you think that's because esports is pretty young?
I think it's because it's young, and I also just think, when you look at the personalities of people who are leading businesses in the realm of gaming and to a certain extent esports, you're looking at people who are doing this because it's core to what they do. And we're not talking about cities like New York, LA, and London. We're looking at other cities around the world. So the personalities, the psychographic profile is different.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to be with people who are doing what they love. And that, I think, has been a great aspect of how we as a business have grown into this space in the last couple of years. And then more importantly, been able to build a team of people who feel that way, who are doing something that they absolutely love, that they could do with their eyes closed.
But now with the professionalization of esports, we're going to see a lot of brands, and we've already been seeing it in the past year or so, right? And a lot more brands are going to be interested in getting into esports as an outsider of some sorts, right? And so would you be worried if those brands are going to get their hands on esports and, change the culture in a way that you have been experiencing in the past 3 years?
Yeah, I would say, we have to be really sensitive to the fact that these are communities.
Yeah.
And when we look at traditional sport or entertainment, right? So I come from North America, from the U.S., and we've got a 60 to 70 year history of organized sport, and there's 4 professional leagues in the U.S., and you've got 4 distinct seasons in most cities, and there's infrastructure and stadiums and arenas around that, media networks. There is a history of organized sport on a professional level. When we talk about esports and gaming, you don't have a 60 to 70 year history, and the lines of who owns the rights, which parties are involved and engaged, who owns what, who operates what, and how do you engage throughout that ecosystem of teams and players and content and events doesn't exist. And I think the dangerous part is that brands want to
take control of that.
They want to take control of that, and they also look that people want to simplify things, and they're going to say we want an esports strategy, which is like saying that you want a strategy for football, and your strategy for football can't be that you're going to approach every team the same or the fan base of every team the same. And a brand coming in saying we want an esports strategy, and what worked for us in Mobile Legends in Jakarta is going to work for us on ROV in Bangkok, obviously is not going to happen. And that's what I think we as an agency have been able to do, is really help to kind of translate the need of the brand and the sensitivity of the local culture and helping them come together.
I mean, right there, right? That the fact that you can even identify that is already showing how you're miles ahead of most of the brands that are trying to get into the space.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Because that's the problem, right? Like, everything is happening so fast. Like, even just in Southeast Asia alone, if we're not talking about the global presence of esports, not even Asia in general, but Southeast Asia specifically, each country is like on their own pace, and everybody's gearing towards this one big event in November in the Philippines, which is the SEA Games, right? And like you mentioned, everyone is like trying to get into it, but they don't necessarily know how to approach it, and that's a great thing about esports, I think, because we're still learning together, and so we can't really tell whether someone is in it because they know what's going on, but at the same time we also know that they're here together with us because we are also trying to figure it out along the way. Is that how you feel culture has been approaching esports?
Absolutely, and shout out to Zlapt in Bangkok. If you guys know Zlapt, Pontus Mahler. Pontus has been working with us and doing a great job in Bangkok. We've got a team in the Philippines of 5 or 6 people dedicated to esports and gaming. Ben Stelmacio and Jaime Cruz and a few others, and we rely on them. Right, we rely on local insights from our local staff who are in the culture, who live it, who breathe it, and for us as an agency to come in and counsel brands and to not look at things on a local level is impossible. It would be like Coca-Cola having a general strategy for Southeast Asia.
Right.
It doesn't work, right? We're talking about really distinct and unique communities and cultures. The only thing that this reminds me of, the speed and the energy around esports right now, is some of the work that I had done in China, the last 5 or 6 years, where there's just a real pace and a speed to the way that things move. And earlier in my career, I did a fair amount of work around music and music festivals, and in like 2010 to 2012, there was a lot of money, a lot of interest around electronic music, and things were moving
Oh,
quickly.
yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that was much to that space's demise.
Yeah.
I think that what's taking place in our culture around esports and gaming right now is fantastic, but
Mhm.
we all have to be careful to do the right job at the right time, working with the right people, so that we don't have any negative connotation or
Right.
negative impression in the marketplace. A failed event has a long-lasting
Oh, absolutely.
reputation, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually happened, right? A few events have failed miserably, and it's actually kind of paint an image on the brand itself. Like, one example is actually one of the biggest esports titles nowadays, Fortnite. If you remember, there's one event by Fortnite that's really not in a good place right now, right? And so, but still, Fortnite is still up there, at least top 3, even with the rise of Apex Legends and everything. Fortnite is still there. So, what do you think is the factor that's differentiating them from another title who might have failed an event and just slumped down?
Yeah, before even getting into the event space, and
sure.
I appreciate the question, the success of Fortnite as a title
Yeah.
and the speed with which that happened is unlike anything that I've
unparalleled.
experienced.
It's crazy.
Forget in esports and gaming,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
in the gaming world it's fast, but if you just look at pop culture in general,
Oh.
right?
Yeah.
And let's use a music example. Let's look at Cardi B, an artist who was so new that she didn't have an album. She had 25 singles, and she's absolutely killing it globally right now. She came on pretty quickly, but that's still a rise of 6, 7, 8 months. If
Yep.
you look at Justin Bieber,
That's
2011,
years.
2012,
Yeah.
you know, he came on, you know, fairly quickly, but that's
Yep.
still 6, 9 months.
Yep.
Fortnite was literally almost overnight. And,
Yeah.
and now if we look at Apex, 2 months ago,
Yep.
it's remarkable the speed with which the games are coming to market, and I'm excited to see if they'll stay, right? And if you can get that ingrained into culture where the dances are part of everyday life, and my 5-year-old nephew who's never played Fortnite is flossing, I think that's great. I want to see if that can stay, and then
Right.
the hard part for all of us is figuring out how brands can
Yes.
engage in that and help
Yes.
that community.
Yes.
True.
So yeah, again, Fortnite has been rising meteorically, and back to the question, I guess, like one event failed, but they're still there, whereas other titles might not survive that kind of a failure, right? So is it because Fortnite was already so big that they have that room to, move around and, fail a bit and just experiment on top of those failed events?
Yeah, it's, there's a cultural relevance
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
that title that's
Mhm.
going to give it some staying power.
Yep.
And it is so ingrained right now in pop culture that people want to see it be successful. Also, there's a belief with that type of game that anybody who's participating has a chance to win or a chance to
Yeah.
compete, and you can
Yes.
see yourself in one of those
Yeah.
players. I think that's a little bit harder when you look at, a MOBA and a 5-on-5 or an organized team or league structure that's been around for a while, because there's greater delineation
Yep,
between
yep.
you and the professional level, right?
Right. Yeah, that's great. And I want to jump back to a point you mentioned about this industry moving so fast and parallels with the music industry. So that's actually one of the questions I'm very worried about. Like, money is pouring in so fast in the past few years, and I'm kind of worried the money is going to pour out eventually, right? So what's your perspective on this? Because we as esports enthusiasts, we certainly want esports to stay.
Right.
And I think personally it's going to stay because the support from different key stakeholders, like the players themselves, the organizations, businesses, governments now, is going to support esports enough so that it can stay, which I think is important. So that when the money eventually pours out, it's still going to stay, but we just have to build it again and again. Right. So what's your take on this? Like, the money.
I think it's scary, and I think it's scary for, if we look at whether it's, and I know that you were a trader earlier in your career and we're in Singapore, which is built on, the value of great real estate and location. If we look at other economic factors, right, when money pours into something, there's the concept of a bubble that can create. And I don't think that we're at that place in esports and gaming. We're just in a position where everybody wants what's new and what's next. This is what's hot, and it's where the money's coming. And I think it's important for everybody involved. If you look at the value chain from developer to publisher, event owner, team, player, everybody has to make good decisions. Everybody has to make decisions about their community, their profession, and their future. And that goes for us, right? So we, and AJ Jilka, who's our head of strategy and planning, who's in Japan today, we've had a lot of decisions that we've had to make around how we work with clients. and only working with them on a long-term basis, because there's too much that people want short-term.
Yeah.
We can't meet their expectations. And I think when we look at the way that players are engaging with brands and endorsements, sometimes saying no is the best deal that you do. When we look at the event structures, you know, a failed event is a 2-week headache for the fan who was going to it. It's a 12-month headache for anybody
Yeah.
who's engaged in trying to organize that next event. A bad stream, you know, bad web stream, bad production hurts everybody down the line. So it's incumbent upon all of us, because the rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I think goes back to, you know, what you just said about it being short term. I think that's like a key theme that we can't really shake off in this industry, because, like you said, you know, games could be short term. They couldn't, you know, some games lack survivability because they don't have pre-existing leagues, or they don't have the kind of like virality or support behind it. And then you see quick short-term successes like Apex Legends, or, you know, a new kid on the block. So how are you meant to plan for that as, you know, a sponsor or a brand, if you don't know what the next big thing's going to be? You know, you pour all this money into this game or that game, and then bam, 3-4 months later, it's either declining or there's a new game on the rise. Like, what kind of, like, I don't know, how do you even try to comprehend that risk?
The first thing that I would say is that while there's a lot of energy and money and excitement around the space right now, gaming and esports are here to stay for the long haul, and they were here long before folks like myself got involved, and long before brands like Nike or others got involved. And when we look at Southeast Asia and we look at the psychographic profile of people who are playing games who may not be able to express themselves outwardly like you can in North America or Europe, when we look at the weather and we're in a tropical environment, we don't have 4 seasons a year and 4 seasons of organized sport, and we look at the leapfrogging behavior of people engaging in mobile use before they engage in PC use, this culture is here to stay. This is the future of sport, right? The future of sport is digital, whether you're watching an EPL match, AJ's watching, you know, Manchester United on his mobile phone, or you're engaging in a game, or you're watching somebody play a game. So that's not going to change. And anybody who says that it will, you know, we'd love to have a chat with them.
All right.
What I would say about your question, which is great about titles, that's a big bet on a title, and it's a big bet on a subculture or a community. And what we have tried to do as a company is, you know, we're not called League of Legends Group. We're not Apex Legends Group. We're not called Justin Bieber Group.
Right.
We called ourselves Culture Group because we wanted to take brands to a place where they focused on underlying culture. And the reason is, you know, everybody has a social media strategy. They'll have a music strategy. They'll have a content strategy. We're going to ask them, what's your strategy for culture? And we get a blank look, and they say, what do you mean? And we talk to them about the culture of music, the culture of esports, or the culture of a certain game. And if an advertiser or a brand or any other entity has an underlying dedication to the culture of gaming and esports, that should be continuous, and that bead will be continuous. You may come in and out of the space with bets or propositions relative to certain titles or games or communities or teams, but the underlying dedication to the space is consistent, and that ultimately is what I think is needed to win the hearts and minds of 16-year-old kids who might be in the target audience.
All right, so I think
Damn, I'm sold. Okay,
I
culture
know,
group.
right? No, we just gonna jump into that right now. So, okay, let's jump into the Nike deal, right? So, I know there's few restrictions, but that's fine. What we're interested in is just the narrative, the thought process of Nike getting into esports and League of Legends in more specifically. Can you share with us the thought process behind why Nike chose that game?
Or just to take a step back as well, you know, you mentioned that you'd moved to China. What you know, made you jump into not just the world of esports, but to start Culture Group?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how did that start?
Could I answer that first?
Sure, yeah. That first.
So I was working for AEG in North America, in the U.S., and I'd done a little bit of work with the guys in the China office. They were building arenas around China, and they were promoting live events, concerts, and sports events. And they said, there's an opening there, and would you like to go? And I thought about it. And at the time, I think that the CMO of Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser brand, right?
Yep.
Had moved from China to New York. And my boss, Todd Goldstein, who was the chief revenue officer, said, Michael, the best marketers, guys who we work with, are moving back from China to the U.S., and obviously there's a lot of talent, amazing marketers there. You should go and work with them. And that was in 2012. and I've been here since, and I haven't necessarily found all of those great marketers. What I did find was an environment of brands who had a great thirst for culture, like we were just talking about, but there's such a gap between the thirst that they have for culture, the desire, and the ability to access it. And we didn't see a lot of agencies. There's amazing agencies in the marketplace, but we didn't see agencies that were dedicated to this space. And we didn't see brands that had that knowledge. So if you've got a 47-year-old marketing director and the target audience is a 16-year-old girl, we need somebody to translate the needs of a K-pop fan to that marketing director, or a 16-year-old boy and talking about esports and gaming. So, working with my partner Doug Scott, who's based in New York, who I've known for a number of years, we built this agency, and AJ's come along as head of strategy and planning and played a very, very big role in what we do in China with his understanding of youth culture in that market. That's why we built the agency. Ultimately, it led us over to the great team at Riot in China. Phil So and Jay Wu are partners and clients, and we think the world of Riot as a company and of those guys as executives. And we really collectively had a vision for, if you look at the LPL, it has all of the hallmarks of organized sport. It's got teams, you've got underdogs, you've got icons, you've got heroes, you've got losing streaks and winning streaks, and you have people competing at the highest levels competitively within their field.
And an insanely dedicated fan base, right? The Chinese fans are crazy. Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And when you look at these fan bases that are kind of local in nature, to each of the cities in China, we all realized there was something really special there. And we felt that the next generation of fan in China wasn't going to be an NBA fan. It was going to be a fan of an LPL team, right? And there was amazing viewership. And we wanted to marry that with a brand that had a vision for supporting that culture, recognizing the value of every athlete, and that if you have a body, you are an athlete, and ultimately supporting that community and those teams and fans, and creating amazing product that one day will be on the backs of fans. So, a couple of years ago, I went to an event in Guangzhou, and a young woman was a fan of WE, right? And she had a black hooded sweatshirt, and there was a red tag on it, and it had the name of her favorite player, and it was cool. It's like it was streetwear, it was cool. She bought it on Taobao, and it was made in a basement somewhere. And there's obviously a better way, and we couldn't be more excited about Nike's entry into the space and their commitment to the LPL.
That's so cool. I mean, when I saw the news and I saw Uzi there as well as one of the he was one of the ambassadors, right?
So Nike has a relationship. We're not involved in that, but Nike does have a relationship with some of the players. And look, anytime that you can work with truly best in class companies, it's an amazing opportunity. And if you look at the history of what Nike's done in other sports, there's no doubt that their entry into esports will be a massive success.
It's just gonna add on to the momentum that we already have, right? So Nike, again, one of the biggest brands, and just that name alone, like if I mention Nike to someone who doesn't necessarily know about esports, they're gonna be questioning, like, what's Nike doing there? Right. And so that's the same question that we've been asking, to be honest. Like, obviously, we have the answer of getting connected with the younger audience, right? I'm wondering if you can answer this question, but from a business perspective, is it going to make sense for them or other brands who are looking into getting into esports?
I don't think that in today's corporate environment, brands can make those decisions at that level if it doesn't make financial sense.
Oh, absolutely.
And what we tell, and this is getting a little technical, but what we always tell our clients is it's not just return on investment, which is a financial metric of looking at how many dollars can I make. It's return on objective. What is your objective as a brand? If you're looking to reposition yourself, if you're looking to be more relevant among a youth audience, if you're looking to shape culture, that's an objective that has to be measured. But I don't think that the best brands globally are making commitments into this space because it's cool or hot. I think that they recognize this as the future.
Smart money, right?
Correct. Correct.
It's really cool.
I mean, it just makes sense, right? This is, it's esports, and if Nike is here, with a foot in, I mean, for the next decade or so, I think this is going to be the way to go. Here. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine like esports players having their own like signature jerseys or like shoes or it's nuts, but it's got to start somewhere. And it started back in the day with the NBA, the NFL. For them, so now I can start here as well.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the history of NBA culture, for example, you know, the players are wearing the clothing that the leagues wanted them to wear and what they were required to wear. Now they've developed their own sense of fashion. A lot of them have their own lines, right?
Yes.
The concept of the Jordan brand is the
Yes.
Jordan line. A lot of them now have their own, you know, higher fashion or lifestyle lines outside of traditional sports.
Yeah.
If you look at media and culture, this concept of a creator or an influencer didn't exist 15 years ago.
No.
And we're sitting in the heart of that right here in
Yes.
Southeast Asia when we look at how much consumption there is and how popular some of these creators are.
Yep.
Absolutely. You know, it's like for an NBA player to go and get your own like shoe line with Nike or Adidas or, you know, Puma. That was huge.
It's huge.
And then the next step is kind of like, you know, where it's your name isn't just synonymous with the brand. It is
It is
like
the brand.
It overarches it,
Correct.
right? You know, when someone thinks of Jordans, they say Jordans.
say
They don't say
Jordan, yeah.
Nike, Air Jordan.
Exactly.
They say Jordans.
Yeah.
But if we look at it on an esports perspective, these guys on Twitch are selling their merch already.
Mm.
You know, their name is their brand, and people are buying this up and buying this up. So what's the next level if they're already at the level where, you know, I mean, like, again, another example, Lewis Hamilton. He was a bit late to like the testing because he was launching his own brand with Tommy Hilfiger, you know, for like 2 weeks. And again, that's the next step. So where do the esports guys go?
I think you're going to see a replication of that, right? And I think if you look at, for example, you know, the success of the Fenty line,
Yeah.
Right.
with Rihanna
Yeah.
and the power that she brought to that. If you look at the success of what some of the Kardashians have done, yes, we're talking general media, but in each of the different sectors of media and sport and entertainment, you're looking at people who have taken control of their brands. And I think that the, you know, highest level of engagement, you know, that we will find in esports, right? That those creators, influencers, or players at that level are going to take control, and they're going to say, you know what, I've got something. I've got a story I want to tell. That's going to come out through a creative execution in my clothing line or in my merchandise line, and they're going to start to take control of their audience. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah.
100 Thieves, great example.
Absolutely.
And if you look at the money that they're attracting from an investment perspective, they're getting money from artist managers, established sports and entertainment professionals. And those guys are much more of a culture brand than a competition brand.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about culture then. I mean, culture group we've talked about, but let's talk about this Southeast Asian culture. Because now we've covered what brands are looking for. They are looking to connect with the younger audience, right? So now let's talk about the other side. What are these younger generations looking for in a sense of culture? Because obviously you've been around Southeast Asia a lot. You've been flying back and forth. You're flying today,
I am.
right?
I,
So where are you flying?
I'm going to Bangkok tonight.
Bangkok. So
Yeah.
which countries have you actually covered in Southeast Asia?
We have an office in Bangkok.
Okay.
We're a Singaporean company.
Okay.
And we have an extensive office in the Philippines.
Philippines.
We also have been traveling to Malaysia. It's a market that's very exciting. It's not the
Okay.
biggest market in Southeast Asia, but the engagement that we see there is really
Definitely.
exciting.
Yes.
And we've got a great local partner we've been working
Right.
with.
What about Indonesia?
I haven't spent a lot of time in Indonesia. That's
Okay.
next.
All right.
We're gonna tackle that one
Okay.
once we get Thailand.
Right.
You know, to
Figure
a
it
little
out.
bit of
Okay.
a more advanced place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Thailand, Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia. What have you learned in the past few years that, you know, this engagement level is unprecedented when it comes to engagement in sports and now esports? What have you learned about these people, these young generations, that's really differentiating them from the previous generations when it comes to engagement to something they really like on a cultural level? What is it that's enabling this esports industry to grow so big that's coming from the perspective of the younger generation?
Right. I think the first thing I've learned, and today's my birthday, so I'm realizing now that
Happy birthday!
no. I'm realizing that I get farther and farther away from the pulse of culture. But what I try to do is we surround ourselves with young people who are in the scene, who are sharp and they're smart, and they can really kind of demystify what's going on.
Right.
Each of these markets is totally different.
Yeah.
And having a Southeast Asia strategy for us as a business doesn't work. We need a country-by-country strategy, and really we're looking at the capital cities in each of those countries. And when we look at esports and gaming, we've got to look at the communities that are vibrant in each of those countries. And I think when we look at the engagement, we're looking at markets where there's an inherent distrust of media. There is a lack of infrastructure for other forms of entertainment and sport. And we're finding kids who are able to really express themselves outwardly in a very different way through gaming and esports than they would in real life. And you find these people, you find these competitive gamers in every office. So, you know, whether it's the woman from legal or the person from accounting,
Yeah,
who's kind of a
that's
lunch,
true.
you know, they're
Yeah.
quiet during the day, but then
Yeah.
they're kind of a lunchtime
Oof.
hero on Mobile Legends.
Yes.
You know, we love finding that. I think what we one of the most interesting things that we found is just the strength of each community and the role that a game will play in developing a community, and how that community then will respond to teams and influencers and leagues, and the difference of people within that hardcore community of each of those titles. They have to be treated totally differently
Right.
than another title, right?
Yeah.
We can't treat the Dota 2 community the way that we treat the ROV community, or explore them in the same way. And that's the hardest part, because it's, yes, great. They might all be men 18 to 24, but what makes them tick, and more importantly, how to reach them, is very different.
It's very
And
different.
That's the hard part of the
Yes.
job.
And one problem that's very inherent for marketers and advertisers is that there's this specific data I read online that 80% of engagers, viewers of esports, use ad block. That's a problem, right?
I mean, who wants to watch an ad, right?
Exactly. So, but again, the businesses thrive through advertising, right? But with this behavior from the younger generations, it's not enough to just rely on that anymore. And I think you are definitely involved in this by educating the brands, you know, to make them realize that advertising is the old way and now there's a new way. And so maybe you can share with us, like,
Sure.
engaging with this younger generations. What does it take for brands beyond advertising?
One of the things that we look at, and AJ does an amazing job of this, is what is the customer journey? What is the journey of that gamer or that esports athlete in that local market, from the province, you know, from Iloilo in the Philippines? What is the difficulty of that person connecting, competing, creating, sharing, and looking at the journey, and then trying to understand, okay, if we segment the market using the qualitative and quantitative insights that we have, what's the journey of that person, and how can we improve their experience? If, as a brand, we can help to improve their experience, we're going to have a customer, if not for life, then for a very long time. And we have a firm belief as an agency that brands should shape culture, not rent media.
Right.
Renting media meaning buying a spot,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And the era of advertising, as Doug would say, is over. And you know, we really think that experience is the future of everything. There's a reason that people are staying at Airbnb as opposed to hotels.
Yep.
We all want an experience. So
Yep.
brands that are able to deliver an experience to a consumer that's authentic, it's memorable, it's delivered in the right way, and if they can do that on a repetitive basis, they can develop a really, really strong relationship with that customer.
It's more about being innovative, right? And kind of because we're still consumers. We still consume, you know, media, could potentially consume ads. It's just a matter of, you know, making it not something that we hate.
Yeah,
And
like Thai ads are so amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're based in Bangkok as well, right? And
Yeah.
you know Thailand does a really great job.
And they have the reputation of doing
It's
And
such a
really-
creative market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a creative I love Bangkok as a
Yes.
city,
Mm.
and it's cosmopolitan. It's not nearly as local as you'd be led to believe. It's
Mm.
rather international right now. There's a great startup scene, and you've got domestic brands who compete with one another, 2, 3, 4 in each category.
Right.
And what we really like about that market is you've got really sharp, smart, second, third, sometimes fourth generation owners looking
Wow.
after brands, and they're
Damn.
looking to really diversify those brands. So
Right.
it's not like China where the brands are all 20 to 30 years
Yeah,
old,
yeah.
right? It's totally different. You know, Huawei didn't exist 40 years ago. Huawei exists in the last 25 years. Singha beer has existed for the last 85 years. Other domestic brands have been there 50, 60, 70 years, and they've got family owners who are coming back from overseas who are realizing, you know what, I have amazing brand equity and I have great reach and scale. I can play a role in transforming the company. And what we like is we come in and say, you can, and we think you can shape culture, right? So if you look at the equity that you have in your brand and the way that you engage customers, the average age of your customer, how can we pivot and move into esports, for example, in gaming, and develop a really significant proposition. And the creativity in Thailand's off the charts.
Yes, that's amazing to hear.
Yeah,
right?
the food's pretty good. So.
I mean, we have it here as well, and it's amazing. So,
Absolutely.
all right, which brands do you think are doing a great job in this?
I-
Because the next step would be to get more brands into this, of course. But we kind of have to. I mean, I don't want to say filter, but we have to assess which brands are going to have the most potential when it comes to getting into esports, right? When it comes to culture shaping as well. Which brands do you think has the potential to move in a way that some other previous brands have done?
Brands that have the potential
Yes.
generally are going to be the challenger brands because they're willing. And a challenger brand is somebody who's not number one in their category.
Right.
And that's the person who can come in and do things differently and who is going to give authenticity to the gaming community that gamers desire and make them feel like they are authentic. I think those types of brands have an opportunity to come in and shape this culture and provide a lot of services and benefits to a customer and really be a legitimate force in that person's life as a gamer. In terms of brands that are doing a great job right now, locally, regionally, I think Alan Fong and the team at Air Asia are doing a nice job in being evangelists for the space. And shout out to Alan, who I think the world of. And, he's just a lovely guy who gets everybody excited about that space. Globe Telecom in the Philippines, who is a client of Culture Group, has done a great job. But they've taken a very, very long-term approach and a very holistic approach to, titles and tournaments and teams and players, and looking at how they can create Philippine heroes on a national stage and their role as a corporate citizen. Jake San Diego, who's the head of gaming and esports there, really has a belief, and their CEO, Ernest Koo, have a belief that Filipinos can win medals, whether it's in the Southeast Asia Games this fall or later on in the Olympics. And they're doing that, and they're putting action to that by investing in the space.
Right. Can we talk more about that? Like the Philippines?
Sure.
I mean, the space is crazy, and one of the most successful organizations from the Philippines is Mineski, and they've been heavily expanding around the region and doing so much stuff that I think is really helping out the esports scene, right? Maybe we can talk more about your specific dealings with, I mean, your work with Global Telecoms, right?
Yeah. We can share a little bit. And,
Okay.
there's some stuff that's out in the public. Just touching on Mineski, Ronald's an amazing force in the industry and kind of the godfather of esports in the Philippines, and really done a great job in expanding their business, and somebody that I'm honored to work with and that I learn a lot from when we have a chance to speak. Globe has partnered with a number of organizations locally in the Philippines, Mineski being one of them. And the team at Globe, when they engaged us a few years ago, really went back to purpose. What is their purpose as a brand? What are they looking to accomplish? What's that customer journey? And we actually learned a lot from them about the role that they would play as a corporate citizen in connecting people to their futures. Through that, this proposition was developed of creating Philippine heroes and champions and putting them on a regional and global stage. And through relationships with Riot Games and Garena around specific titles, and through a partnership around a team that they've launched, Team Liab, which did pretty well over the weekend in the AOV in recent weeks, and their AOV team. It's also a League of Legends team and a Hearthstone team. And some plans they have for the future around other ways to engage the audience, whether that's training centers, casting studios, things of that nature. It's hard to find brands, right? Brand marketers have to win every quarter, and they got to keep their bosses happy. And it's hard to find brands who take a long-term approach. And when you find one, you realize how special they are.
Yep, they are. And that's the thing about esports. You can't really bet on the short term when it comes to financial returns, right? But when it comes to equity in the term in the brand sense, people are gonna start seeing you as that brand that's supporting the industry. And I think it's great that the Philippines is doing this. And just yesterday, Singapore got some news as well. Singtel have actually sponsored the national team for SEA Games, and they've sponsored a number of teams here in Singapore, like Team Resurgence.
Yeah.
And this is the trend that we're seeing. Telecoms are really heavily invested
Very
in
heavy.
esports. Maybe you can explain to us, like, why do you think this is?
Sure. A telco is both a endemic and non-endemic brand. And they're not an endemic brand in the sense that your headphones and your keyboard are made by the telco, but you need that company and their services to connect to your game, to connect to your server. I don't need Coca-Cola to play basketball, and I don't need a telco to play basketball. I need a telco to power my gaming experience.
Yes.
I need a telco to power my viewing or streaming experience. So there's a natural reason why they would want to engage in that space, because it fits their core business. Number two, the audience, right? If I'm consuming data today and I have a SIM or a home broadband connection, I'm going to be spending more in the future as my income rises. And then from a third perspective, it makes a lot of sense for telcos to be in the business of shaping culture, right? And to be in the business of games and to be able to amplify behavior that's already taking place by supporting those communities. And I think Singtel's done a great job, and we know the team there and think very highly of them. And what I love is they haven't done it once; they've done it multiple times.
Multiple times, yes.
Right? And if you look at yesterday's announcement, that's the second or third announcement. And there's a consistency to the way that they've gone in the market, and it's clear that they're a leader, and they've galvanized the community, and they're bringing in outside partners. It's not everything, Singtel on their own. They're bringing in the right partners, the right help, and borrowing the right equity from other partners to be able to create programs that are going to matter.
So Singtel and Globe Telecom, they're doing a really great job in promoting esports and blasting it through to the younger audience. So let's talk about SEA Games. Are you looking forward to SEA Games, or are you going to be there at SEA Games?
I will likely be there.
Right.
I'll definitely be at the qualifiers. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Look, it's new to me. It's we're heavily involved in exploring opportunities on behalf of our clients around the region, and we hear what's in the media. But the excitement around esports and SEA Games has really thrown. It's very surprising to us the level to which we've seen that much. I'd be curious to hear from you guys how you've received the announcements.
Well, the first time I heard about it was I was sitting around the TV room at home back in Indonesia. I was with my dad, and when I read that piece of news, esports is going to be featured in SEA Games, right? I told my dad, but curiously, he wasn't very dismissive of it. He was actually impressed, right? And so I saw the change in mindset there. That even now parents are not very against gaming, whereas in the past, parents are very skeptical about gaming, like let alone esports as a career choice, right? But when I told my dad about SEA Games, he's actually impressed that we have managed to get esports as a recognized title, right? So my experience has been totally great.
It's awesome.
I think my experience is a little different,
right?
Because I wasn't as surprised. I mean, I think just based off the fact that it was the Southeast Asia Games, right? Like bringing in esports just made so much sense. You can double or triple your viewership for the event if you manage to bring in the gaming community across the different game titles that you choose. For me, the big one where I would kind of like shake my head and say, "Wow, is this happening?" is the Olympics, right? Like if it's there, then that's
that will be happening.
Yeah, that's
going to happen.
Statement.
Do you think?
I do.
Because the IOC is kind of pushing back a little
it'll
bit.
happen. Just depends which game title, right?
Look, I personally think that there are a few Olympic sports that may be ready to be put out to pasture. I think that if you look at the difficulty, well, there's the business reason, right?
Yes.
And that's I can speak to that side of it. I think if you look at the way that people engage in viewing media, and you look at audiences around the world, including esports in the Olympics as a medal sport, will bring a totally different audience and new storylines. The difficulty is that's going to come at the expense of another sport. And another sport that's been around for 30, 40, 50, 80 years, and domestic organizations around the world in each country who've supported that sport. And there's only so many hours of Olympic programming, right? And there's only so many national governing bodies that are funded. So there's a real uphill battle, I think, politically, in trying to get esports included in the Olympics. But I think that I would be very surprised if you didn't see it.
You didn't see it, yeah.
Correct. BMX biking is an Olympic sport,
yeah.
right?
There's some really crazy Olympic sports.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking about sports versus esports, right? But now let's talk about esports in itself. Within esports, there are titles competing for that spot. And what I'm worried is there's going to be too much of a political movements around, these different games. Like, how do I get my game to be featured as an Olympic sport? Because obviously, like Riot, for example, if you get League of Legends as one of the Olympic sports, that's gonna be establishing you to be one of the developers that successfully made esports
Yeah.
into the mainstream culture.
And by the way, I would be a proponent of that.
Yeah,
I would be a-
likewise.
I mean,
I'm
League of
on your
Legends is
side.
great,
I'm a big
right?
I'm a
proponent of
league.
that. we love the Riot guys,
Yes.
and there's a title that's been around for 10 years
Yes.
is doing something right.
Mhm.
I think that the hardest thing I said earlier of what we do as a company is getting brands to understand the culture and think a little bit longer term.
Mm-hmm.
The second hardest thing around esports and gaming is helping people who have never touched a joystick or a keyboard, a mouse, or a controller, or put on headphones understand
Yeah.
the difference between the titles
Yep.
and how that infrastructure looks. There is no difference in football, as my colleagues would say, around the world, right? AJ
Yeah.
corrects me a lot. It's the same game around the world. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's youth women's football. Sometimes it's professional football.
Yep.
Same game. It's incredibly difficult explaining to brands how the titles work, and then more importantly, the different formats and the categories.
Yes.
Because you can explain to them, all right, here is the MOBA category. Here are generally the principles of what those games will include and what they'll look like. And then they're going to say, why is this game, why is League more popular than Dota? Why? And to be able to answer that conclusively is really difficult.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a challenge then, right?
That is a
That's
big
the challenge,
challenge. That's a
yes.
big challenge. And I think though the industry will mature because there's more money to be made and there's more money
Yes.
to be lost and there's more at stake. And as that happens, you'll see more organization around federations and governing bodies globally. And I think that's going to be led by the developers who actually have the most at stake.
And games themselves, like you mentioned the difficulty of explaining it is like what's the difference between this game and this game, even though they are in the same category like MOBA or FPS. Within the games themselves, they actually change a lot in the span of a year, right? Just yesterday I saw the patch to the game I play, Counter-Strike. It changes the game fundamentally. Like the economy of the game is different now, and it's gonna have a major impact. And the next major, the biggest tournaments throughout the year, is gonna happen in a few months, and so the teams are not given. I believe they're not given enough time to adjust. But when we talk about Olympics, is it gonna be a problem because the consistency of the games is just not there? Right. But is it something to be worried about, or do you think it's just gonna be another factor that's actually making esports more interesting?
My
Esports.
opinion, it's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
Really good. My opinion is that patches that alter the game and or throw off the balance of the game, or as you mentioned, the economy of the game, right? I think that those should be welcomed. And I can't speak from a competitive gamer's perspective, but if you look at another sport like golf, the course is different every time. Okay. And the
True.
courses change. Okay. And sometimes the putting green is running a little bit faster, which means the ball rolls off potentially and the ball moves faster. Sometimes that green is in the end of the day or a certain type of week a little bit slower. It's a little bit
Right.
easier to play. And then there's weather conditions. Right now, I'm not saying that there should be wind and rain while we have the esports competition, but the legitimacy of esports as a sport and enhanced skill will be further solidified if people are able to play in differing environments.
Yeah.
Now, we can't take a League of Legends player and tell him that he should go and play Overwatch, and that's how we're going to judge how good he is, right? That would be like a basketball player, playing football.
Yep.
Yeah.
But what we can do is recognize that as these games change and they edit and they alter and there are different circumstances to the competitive landscape, players evolve and compete at a high level. And that's what I think will help the space move to a place where people say these guys are competing at the highest level of their space globally on a repetitive basis.
Yes.
And that's why somebody can be called, that's why Faker can be called the Michael Jordan of League.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
Good
I
point.
never actually thought about golf as a parallel to esports
no, it's
changing.
a really
every,
good point. Actually.
That's really great, actually. And you mentioned like having to adjust to the patches is actually proving yourself as one of the players at the top of level,
I mean,
right?
any sport where you are changing the instrument with which they're playing with. Instrument being in this case the game, in golf's case, either the golf ball or the golf course.
Right.
Let's say football, when they changed the actual football specs.
Yes.
Remember,
Right.
like there's some
Yes.
balls that you could just launch. F1, the cars are always changing, so there'll always be that element.
Right.
It's just that in this industry in video games, it happens so frequently, you know, because they're constantly trying to find a balance.
And a more massive scale, to be honest, because when it comes to, let's say, F1, the wheels might change, but it's just maybe the dimensions, or maybe just the size, the thickness of the wheels.
So you guys have Netflix subscriptions, right? So there's a new docu-series that came out about F1 on Netflix.
That's the one I just watched.
If you watch, correct. So if you watch any kind of Netflix like I do, it pops up and it's recommended, right? I don't know the first thing about F1 racing. You know, I've never been to an F1 race. I haven't been to the Grand Prix in Singapore, and I don't know anything about F1. But I know a lot about stories and what I like to watch and don't like to watch. And for the same reason that during the Olympics in America, when they have a curling competition, I've never gone curling, but I'll watch curling and I'll listen to the storylines. I'm watching that F1 docuseries, and that's culture. It's culture,
absolutely,
and it's community, and it's more importantly, it's content, right?
Yes.
And culture shapes content, and that content that's being distributed is going to create a community of fans, right, who will engage in a conversation. What we really believe around esports and gaming is that we have moved from cult to culture. And what was previously undiscussed is now discussed in grand scheme. And the technical aspects of the conversation we're having around games and patches, I'm not going to understand that if it continues to go further. My mom wouldn't understand it, but they would understand the storylines of professional gamers, the challenges, the difficulties. And that goes back to when we were discussing the LPL and the hallmarks of what we see there, and the reasons that a company like Singtel is getting involved in the national team. That's a story that everybody can understand. And the storytelling that should take place in esports, that will begin to take place around a kid who is living in the northern province in Thailand, or some of these kids in Vietnam who are playing with horrible equipment from a couple of years ago but are winning on the global stage. These are stories I want to hear about, right? That journey.
Yep. And you can go.
Okay.
And God, you guys are so polite.
Sorry. And these teams are actually, the developers and the teams, like Riot, for example, do such a good job of telling these stories in the videos that they produce, in the content that they produce, and especially with the teams themselves, like Team Liquid or 100 Thieves, and they capture everything. And somehow they make it so relatable. Like, I'll look at content that I see on NBA TV or something, and it'll seem like a world away. But then I'll look at my favorite league players going through their week or doing, like, even as simple as ordering a Deliveroo or ordering a Grab.
That's you at the exact moment.
Like, okay, cool, man. Like, it feels so much more relatable, even though they're still miles apart.
Right.
So I don't know what it is about that.
I watch the NBA occasionally, and I look and physically, like, I don't know. For those of you who aren't, I don't have the build of an NBA player. Sorry to ruin your dreams. I learned that at like age 9 myself. But there is a physical limitation, to my ability to perform at that level. But we all believe that we could be an amazing gamer, right?
True.
And there's no physical limitation visually. There's actual limitations to your skill set, but visually you feel that you fit the profile.
Exactly. And it's not just physical, gender, culture, race, everything is just put out of the way when it comes to esports. And that's one of the things that I think is really great about esports, is that we don't have to see the differences because there are none, to be honest. Right. And so, like, talking about Southeast Asia, we have so many different countries in the same region, but we are all unified under that banner of esports. Yeah. Even though there's different titles, but still, we're still that same tribe.
It's a global sport.
Yeah.
there's no denying that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so the question is, what are the stories you like, Michael, from the Southeast Asian region?
I love the story of the everyman. I love the story of, there's, I think it's Team Cyan, AirAsia Cyan in Malaysia. They've got a couple of kids who were, playing in one of the outer provinces and won an online qualifier and made their way to the team. That story to me is amazing. And that story can be replicated in every country for people who didn't necessarily have the exposure but had the skill set. And I really love that. I also love, seeing what happens when people are competing at the highest levels. So, if Made in Thailand is going to a global event, I want to be there. I want to see that.
Exactly. Yes.
I don't need to see the match. I don't need to see the game, right? And I wouldn't necessarily be driven by that. But I want to see what takes place when these kids are getting ready, when they're preparing, what are they eating, what's the nervousness that they're going through, how are they treated when they're flying, when they're landing. They're calling their girlfriends, their mom. I want to understand that journey, and then how are they received when they come back home and they've won a championship? Because anybody can relate to that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, have you watched? I mean, I know you guys are into League of Legends. Have you watched the international docu-series?
No, I haven't.
You have to watch the True Sight series, bro.
For
Because
Dota?
for Dota. So, I mean, you won't understand the games probably, but they actually take you through the grand finals. Like they give you the behind the scenes and the journey between the games. Like in between the breaks, you'll have these players go back and discuss what's going on, great and wrong. And there you can actually start seeing what the team is actually like in real life. And that's part of the greater stories that I think is happening in esports is that you can have these teams that are so good, but you can't see much more beyond their gameplay. But when it comes to this series, they actually give you a peek, right, into their life. Like, what are they like? What is this guy like when he's raging? What is this guy like when he's actually motivating the team?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stories I like personally, and the start with Dota is really great, and I'm really looking forward to see a series by another game like League of Legends, because I want to see for myself whether I can still relate to that even though I don't play the game.
Yeah.
Because that's what's important, I think.
No, I think you will be. I understand what you mean. I mean, same here goes when I watch like a Counter-Strike series or Overwatch, or I think definitely you'll still be able to relate because at the end of the day, like, we're all gamers, right?
Yes.
And it's just about appreciating a different kind of art, but in the same field. I think Netflix, if anything, is going to be a huge player at some point. I think these guys, shout out to Netflix, I think these guys are just waiting. And I think that, I mean, if you take, I read something recently about Netflix being the like largest untapped ad revenue space right now in the world, and if they were to switch on ads, like, it's just going to be a crescendo of revenue. And then you compare it to like something like Twitch, which gets more hits than ESPN, CNN,
Yep.
So I think Netflix are going to be interesting to watch and see what they come up with.
What do you think?
Shout out for the word crescendo. That was
Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
$100 on that.
Word of the day.
Look, man, I'm all for it. I think that anybody like Netflix who has the kind of scale that they have and the storytelling capability that can bring these stories to the forefront.
And the brand.
It's amazing. Correct. And I think it's amazing. And I think that will happen. You need good storytellers and filmmakers to create that and have that distributed on Netflix. But I think that's
so true.
Very much going to be at play. And I think if we look at, sorry, we're going off esports here. I'm going into the media landscape a little bit. But if you look at what used to be like appointment-based television, so when we grew up, there was a certain event that you'd watch on TV at a certain time. And then as a network like ESPN grew, or Fox Sports here in Asia, you'd get more views of that event. So there was a major football event, and it would be, okay, you had the game, and that was 90 minutes, but then you'd see the pregame, the postgame, et cetera. And it was this concept of 360 degrees of content around a certain event, whether that is, the Asia Football Cup Finals, or it's an EPL match, or it's the Super Bowl. I think that we're now moving to, instead of 360, we're moving to 365. Where instead of seeing everything around that event on one day, right, which we just talked about, like the International takes place over 2 weeks in August. That's fantastic. Where do those teams go? They still exist. Those personalities still exist. I want 365 days of access to that player and that team, and that story should be told 365 days. And to tie it back to the work that you were asking about earlier with brands, brands need to recognize that. And you have to go from being occasional to being always on. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to be real in this community.
Exactly.
And I do think that will directly lead to there being fans, even if you will have bandwagon fans in esports, probably much to your, chagrin. But I think that's going to happen, and people will love players because of the way that they look or the attitude that they have.
Wow.
Thank you for your perspective.
Really,
seriously, the insight that you've provided in this show has been great.
Well, your guest must not have been very good reason. Somebody must have canceled.
No, that's the thing. We come out of this
Terrence
show
was
every
good.
week. Yeah, we come out
Terrence
every week and we're
amazing.
like, hey man, that was a great show.
Exactly.
That was an insane guest.
Yes.
How's next week gonna top it? And we're always delightfully
pleasantly
surprised.
surprised. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you, Michael. It's really great. And maybe we just kind of to wrap this up, like, what are the things you're looking forward to in the next year? Obviously, there's SEA Games, but
You've got the SEA Games in November.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing a ton of work in Bangkok and Thailand. Really excited to see what's going to happen with Team Liab in the Philippines. And we're watching the drone racing space. I think
drone
that
racing.
Oh,
Yeah. 'Cause
that's one of
Someone was
the-
talking about this.
That might be one of the future esports titles. Right?
Yeah.
'Cause it's really
I don't think that esports is limited to games
No, no, not
specifically,
at
and I
all,
think when we
yeah.
look at drone racing, the same characteristics are
it
there.
is.
So we're paying a lot of attention to that, and I'm
Yeah,
really
electronic
excited.
arts is-
I'm really excited to see how some of these movie theaters and facilities in Asia are going to bring international content into their venues, and we're watching the arena and stadium space
Yeah.
as well.
that's one big thing as well in esports. So looking forward to that as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Michael,
Thank you.
again. It's been really great. And so we're just gonna wrap this up by the last question.
If you could choose one person to be on the show next after you, who would you choose? It could be anyone. It could even be Mark Merrill if you wanted to be.
What did Terrence say?
What did Terrence say?
Terrence said, I think Ivan.
Okay.
I don't remember actually, but yeah, he's coming actually. Ivan, one of the team owners from Singapore. And so, what do you think? Who's next?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think you guys should interview Jake San Diego from Globe Telecom.
Okay.
Okay.
I think Jake should be on here. That'd be a good
Jake.
one.
All right, let's
That'd be
look
really
forward to
interesting,
that.
actually,
Yeah.
to get a telecom
Yeah,
guy.
we're trying to get as many people from as diverse backgrounds as possible
Yeah.
in
Absolutely.
esports and get as much perspective as we can. So yours has been great. Thank you so much,
Thank
Michael.
you guys. Thank you for having me.
And so we're going to end it here. We're going to see you at the next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.